Hey YouTubers, the verdict for the McMichael trial, the father and the son and the neighbor Brody who shot Arbery, Ahmaud Arbery. The verdict came in about a week and a half ago. I didn't get a chance to put it on my channel, so I'm putting it now because I want this case documented on my channel. I don't know if you guys followed the case at all and what happened leading up to the murder. And I wanted it on my channel for historic reasons and for young black men to be very careful out there in the world, because just by jogging through a strange neighborhood in America can get you killed, because there are a lot of places that are still under Ku Klux Klan control, and a lot of white folks, not all, but some, are very racist still. So Ahmaud Arbery was a 25-year-old black man, a young black man who was shot after being chased by 3 white men for jogging through a neighborhood in Georgia. For a lot of black people, we look at Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, as a place that is up and coming for a lot of blacks to make it and to earn a lot of income and to live well. But it is still known as a place in the Deep South. It is still one of the states that had the Confederate flags flying on the courthouse steps up to last year. And it is considered still a very racist state. So although there is progress for black people there are some things have never changed. So Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, was chased by 3 white residents of a South Georgia neighborhood. They were found guilty on murder charges and sentenced to life in prison. The father and son was sentenced to life without parole, and Travis Brody, the friend in the neighborhood, was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. This is just a brief recap of the case. 2 of the men, Travis McMichael, 35, and his father, Gregory McMichael, 65, received life sentences without the possibility of parole. The life sentence for the third man, their neighbor, William Bryan, 52, allows for the possibility of parole after 30 years. The 3 men were convicted of state crimes. The case is likely to be appealed to the Georgia Supreme Court. The men also face a trial on potential life sentences in federal court, where they are charged with hate crimes and attempted kidnapping. Jury selection in the case is scheduled to begin on February 7th, which is next month. So they were given life in prison by the state. That's the first trial. The second trial is upcoming in February, and they face more charges for civil rights violations of Ahmaud Arbery. That's a separate case altogether. The slaying of Ahmaud Arbery was captured on tape, videotape, by Brody, the neighbor, because he thought the tape would exonerate them and they were in the right to chase him and shoot him. So he taped everything. They thought they had policing rights as citizens, and they thought they had a right to detain Ahmaud Arbery for supposedly breaking the law. They did not have evidence, however, that he broke the law. And the law here that they felt he had broken was going on to a construction site. Although they did not see him take anything, they presume, because it was not his first time entering this particular construction site and the building and looking around, they assume he had taken something. And that was the law they thought he had broken. Although It would just be trespassing in this case because they had not seen him take anything. So they can only assume that he was trespassing. I lived in Georgia for about 2 years. And I remember when I was there, myself and my sisters used to drive out to construction sites, all the new homes that are being developed. And we used to look into the model homes. You know, usually they set up one particular house as a model house. So everyone can go in and look around and see the possibilities of how you can decorate your home. But we used to, that was our thing to do. We would just, all the new projects and the new subdivisions, we used to go to the model homes and there would be no one there. We would go maybe Saturday or Sunday, usually on a Sunday. It used to be nice and quiet on the site, no one there. We used to walk through the homes, but now I see how dangerous that could be, because in the state of Georgia, if they assume that you are stealing something, they can shoot you. So we really took a lot into our hands, and we weren't the only ones who loved to do that. We knew of other people who used to go to construction sites and just look around. So it was not something out of the norm for Arbery to do, because it was the thing to do out there. You'd look around the site, see what's going on. I used to love to look at the when they're building homes from the ground up. I would pull up, I would sit there and watch what, how they pour the rebarb and, and the whole process. And I would do that from time to time, maybe the first, second week, and then wait a month, then go back and look at it again. And that's how I learned how to build homes myself. So, like I said before, Ahmaud Arbery was not the only one who would go look at construction sites. Myself and my sisters did the same thing. And we learned from the ground up how they poured the structure and how they built up the walls and X, Y, and Z concerning the building of a home. That's how you learn, really. You just, you observe. And so getting back to the story, on February 23rd, 2020, Ahmaud decided to go out jogging. He was an avid jogger. His family said he loved jogging, and all his friends said if it was not raining, he was jogging. So Ahmaud was in Chatello Shores, a nearby neighborhood, when a man standing on his front yard saw him go by, and according to police report, the man was Gregory McMichael, who said Ahmaud looked like a man they suspected in several break-ins in the area and called his son, Travis McMichael. And according to police report, the two men grabbed a .357 Magnum handgun and a shotgun, got into a pickup truck and chased Ahmaud Arbery, unsuccessfully trying to cut him off. That's when the third man became involved in the pursuit, according to police reports. In a recording of the 911 call, which appeared to have been made moments before the chase began, a neighbor told the dispatcher that a black man was inside a house that was under construction on the McMichael's block. And so father and son decided to chase Arbery because they thought he had stolen something from the construction site. And according to Gregory McMichael's account in the police report, they then pull up to Mr. Arbery, and Travis McMichael got out of the truck with a shotgun. Gregory McMichael stated that the unidentified male began to violently attack Travis, and the two men then started fighting over the shotgun, at which point Travis fired a shot, and then a second later, there was a second shot, the report states. The first shot was off camera, but it was heard. The second shot was on camera. Arbery was not armed, according to police report. So I'm putting myself in Ahmaud Arbery's shoe. Someone is at me or have a shotgun ready to shoot me. My first reaction would be it's either fight or flight. Now, Arbery has been running for 5 minutes at this point, so he was trying to flee. When he was cornered and saw where the shotgun was pointed at him, of course, at that point, you've got to fight because you have no option to flee anymore. You're cut off by two vehicles, so you've got to put up some type of resistance. Now, Gregory McMichael, the father, is a former Glenn County police officer and a former investigator with the local district attorney's office. So the McMichaels knew someone in the district attorney's office. They had friends there. Because remember, the father worked as an investigator and a cop at one point, so he knew friends in the department. And for 2 months, this case was at a dead end. No arrests were made. These men were walking free because the district attorney's office did not want to make an arrest. So shortly after the shooting, with no arrest made, the prosecutor for the Brunswick Judicial Circuit, Jackie Johnson, recused herself because Gregory McMichael, the father, worked in her office. She knew him personally, and therefore this was a conflict of interest. The case was then transferred from Brunswick to Waycross, a different jurisdiction. So it was sent to George E. Barnhill, the district attorney in Waycross, Georgia. So after this case was sent to George E. Barnhill, the district attorney in Waycross, Georgia, he later also recused himself from the case. After Mr. Arbery's mother argued that there was a conflict because his son also worked for Brunswick District Attorney. So they all knew each other. So there was a conflict there also. So Jackie Johnson recused herself because she knew the father. And when the case was sent from Brunswick to Waycross, the Waycross district attorney recused himself because his son worked in the same office as Jackie Johnson. And if Ahmaud Arbery's mother did not bring up this point of fact, no one would have been the wiser. But before Barnhill recused himself, he wrote a letter to the Glenn County Police Department arguing in the letter that there was not sufficient probable cause to make an arrest in the Ahmaud Arbery case. So he figured pretty much he was going to recuse himself, but before he recused himself, he was going to nail that coffin shut and make sure that Travis and his father was not going to be arrested. So Mr. Barnhill noted that the McMichaels were legally carrying their firearms under Georgia open carry law. He said they had been within their rights to pursue what he called a burglary suspect and cited a Georgia law that says a private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. But remember, they had not seen him take anything. So by his own words, this was not warranted. The citizen's arrest upon another citizen was not warranted in this case because they had not seen Arbery take anything. Mr. Barnhill also argued that if Mr. Arbery attacked Travis McMichael, Mr. McMichael was allowed to use deadly force to protect himself under Georgia law. Now, here again, the argument is weak because Arbery was unarmed. He was not strapped with any weapons, so he had a right against imminent danger against his body, against his being. He had a right to defend himself by trying to grab that shotgun that was pointed at him. So if we follow Mr. Barnhill's logic, the only person here who had a right to defend himself would have been Arbery because he was unarmed, firstly. Secondly, a gun was pointed at him. And any sane person who's got a gun pointed at them is going to try to grab the gun, try to not get shot. So on all accounts, Barnhill's logic was very weak and flimsy, to say the least. So anger grew over the killing and the lack of consequences for the McMichaels. When people saw the tape on social media, that's when it stirred people up and they started to move for justice for Arbery. Because remember, Brody is the one who shot the tape and he thought they were in the right. They were making a citizen's arrest and they were doing everything right. So he had no problems releasing the tape. It was reported that he sent it to a radio station, and the radio station then sent it to a news reporter who bust the story open, which then put it on social media. So Brody used his cell phone to videotape the shooting. And the cell phone video shows Arbery running along a shaded 2-lane residential road when he comes upon a white truck with Travis McMichael standing beside the driver's side of the door with a shotgun. And Greg McMichael, the father, is in the bed of the pickup truck with a handgun. So Arbery is looking down the barrel of a shotgun and a handgun. What does he do? He tries to escape. So he runs around the truck and disappears briefly from view. There was a muffled shouting can be heard before Mr. Arbery emerges, fighting with Travis McMichael outside the truck as 3 shotgun blasts echoes. So he shoots 3 times. Travis McMichael shoots 3 times. As Arbery is fighting for his life, trying to keep him from shooting him, trying to grab the gun. So Arbery couldn't get the gun from him. So what does he do next? He tries to run again. But he staggers and falls a few feet away. So what does Travis McMichael do at this point? He shoots him and he turns his back and he walks away. As Ahmaud lay on the ground bleeding to death. So remember Jackie Johnson? Well, she was voted out of her job in September as chief prosecutor for the area and was indicted on a charge of violating her oath of office by showing favor and affection to Gregory McMichael. Remember, he had worked in her office as a cop and a detective. And so she was charged with obstruction for telling 2 police officers on the day of the shooting not to arrest Travis McMichael. Remember, Travis is the son and Gregory is the father. Well, she gave instructions not to arrest the person who shot Ahmaud Arbery. So that's why she was indicted for obstruction and not abiding by her oath of office. Well, that was recapping what happened to Ahmaud. Now, last year, all 3 of these men were found guilty, and their sentencing was scheduled for this year, January of this year. Well, they got the sentences handed down a week and a half ago. And so this is the judge recapping and giving the sentence, actually. This is the clip.
Thereof the defendants. I've also considered any lawful evidence which tends to show the motive of the defendants, their lack of remorse, their general moral character, and any predisposition to commit other crimes. Now, I think in this case, the record speaks for itself, and the defendant's own words, I think, guide this court with regard to sentencing. Went back through my notes and other resources to pull some of the quotes that we have in this case. I'll start with Greg McMichael. In my opinion, Greg McMichael, very early on in this, tried to establish a narrative. He made comments like, Ahmaud Arbery was trapped like a rat. Stop or I'll blow your, and I won't repeat it again, head off. He effectively admitted that he wasn't sure what Ahmaud Arbery had done wrong. Quote, I don't think the guy has actually stolen anything out there, or if he did, it was early in the process. But he keeps going back over and over again into this damn house. Again, back to the narrative. Told Travis, you have no choice. Told another individual at the scene, this guy ain't no shuffler. This guy's an asshole. Commented that he wanted him, Ahmaud Arbery, to know that we weren't playing. If I could have gotten a shot at the guy, I would have shot him. Travis McMichael claims he was in shock. But it's interesting because he talks about his concern for his child and his own well-being. Part of this was while the victim was actually laying there in the street. Commented, this is the worst day of my life. Well, I think it's been touched on here today. There were other individuals that were impacted. I'll look at the video of this incident. When I say the video, I think everybody knows what we're talking about, but there was one part of it that struck me as absolutely chilling, and that is, I believe it's in the enhanced video provided by the GBI. There's a frame where I believe Ahmaud Arbery, it looks to be, if he's 20 yards out, that may be close, 30 yards out. And it's the frame of Travis McMichael lifting the shotgun to fire at Ahmaud Arbery. And you watch that with context. And when I say context, after hearing the evidence in this case, again, thinking about a young man that had been running at that point for almost 5 minutes, and it is a chilling, truly disturbing scene. And we got there because Travis McMichael's father saw Ahmaud Arbery hauling down the street and calls out, let's go. At that point, Travis McMichael, despite whatever may have been going on in his life at that time, with regard to family or otherwise, just goes, grabs a shotgun, and goes because he assumes that it is the right thing to do. Ahmaud Arbery was then hunted down and shot. And he was killed because individuals here in this courtroom took the law into their own hands. Mr. Bryan, he joined in after calling out to the McMichaels. Y'all got him? Claimed he didn't know what was going on, but obviously wanted to know if this individual who was running through the neighborhood, who he didn't know, had been caught in some way. Said, quote, I figured he'd done something wrong, but I didn't know for sure. All right, that wasn't actually this quote. Those quotes are two separate quotes. Didn't know for sure. I thought he would get away. And this is the part that is disturbing to me with Roddy Bryan. If the guy would have stopped, this would have never happened. All of these quotes give context, I think, to the video that we saw during the case. And Miss Wanda Cooper-Jones this morning made a statement that I think, when you look at these statements and you see the videos, is very true. And that is, she said, when they could not scare or intimidate him, they killed him. There's been discussion about remorse. And I agree with counsel that it is dangerous for defendants who have multiple prosecutions against them to make statements of remorse. But remorse isn't something that is simply a statement of regret. Remorse, I think, can be determined by looking at somebody's reaction to difficult circumstances and the reality of the situation that they're in. Again, it doesn't require an apology, and quite honestly, sometimes apologies are made simply to get past problems. Remorse is something that's felt and demonstrated. In this case, getting back to the video, again, after Ahmaud Arbery fell, the McMichaels turned their backs. It's, again, a disturbing image, and they walked away. This was a killing. It was callous, and it occurred, as far as the court is concerned, based upon the evidence, because confrontation was being sought. I think the statement was made during closing arguments. It's interesting to note that the most violent crime in Satilla Shores was the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. So, sentencing does not generally provide closure. I think Ms. Wanda Cooper-Jones also talked about closure, but I don't find that it really does. And I think that's an unfortunate thing, because in this case, I think many people are seeking closure. The mother, the father, the community, and maybe even parts of the nation. But closure is hard to define and is a granular concept. It's seen differently by all depending on their perspective and the prism of your lives. Instead of closure, maybe we best see today's proceeding as an exercise in accountability. We are all accountable for our own actions. Sometimes, in today's day and age, that statement is lost upon many. And today, the defendants are being held accountable for their actions here in Superior Court. Today demonstrates that everybody is accountable to the rule of law. Taking the law into your own hands is a dangerous endeavor. I'm not sure how this comes across. I'll say it anyway. I think ultimately, with regard to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, it holds us all accountable. I've read somewhere, and I don't remember where it was, that at a minimum, Ahmaud Arbery's death should force us to consider expanding our definition of what a neighbor may be and how we treat them. I argue that maybe a neighbor is more than the people who just own property around your house. I also believe that in assuming the worst in others, we show our worst character. Assuming the best in others is always the best course of action. And maybe those are the grand lessons from this case. I will let others spend as much time as they want writing about it and talking about it. But those are my general thoughts with regard to this case and sentencing. That said, with regard to the sentence in this case, as to Travis McMichael, Mr. McMichael, the court sentences you as follows. Count 1, malice murder, life without the possibility of parole. Count 2, felony murder, is vacated by operation of law. Count 3, felony murder, vacated by operation of law. Count 4, felony murder, vacated by operation of law. Count 5, felony murder, vacated by operation of law. Count 6, aggravated assault, merges into count 1. Count 7, aggravated assault. The court sentences the defendant to 20 years consecutive to count 1. Count 8, false imprisonment, merges into count 1. Count 9, attempted false imprisonment, 5 years concurrent to count 7. That is life plus 20. Greg McMichael, the court sentences you as follows. Count 1, malice murder, defendant was found not guilty. Count 2, felony murder, life without the possibility of parole. Count 3, felony murder, vacated. When I say vacated, it's vacated by operation of law in all cases. I'm not going to repeat it. Count 4, vacated. Count 5, vacated. Count 6 merges into count 2. Count 7, aggravated assault, 20 years consecutive to count 2. Count 8, 10 years concurrent to count 7. Count 9, 5 years concurrent to count 7. That is life plus 20 years. Roddy Bryan, I do want to separate a little bit because the state is making a different recommendation. And despite the back and forth that Mr. Goff and I had during this case, I do want to point out a couple things that he raised that I think are appropriate to raise with regard to the sentence. As far as the remorse, I think Roddy Bryan stands in very different shoes. It is obvious from the beginning that he questioned the tragedy that had occurred at the scene. It was on, I believe, I can't remember whose body cam, but the body cam, in fact, questioning whether or not what had occurred, and then took steps early on in this process, I think, that demonstrated that he had grave concerns that what had occurred should not have occurred. And I think that does make Mr. Bryan's situation a little bit different. However, Mr. Bryan has been convicted of felony murder, and I do not believe it can be disputed based on the facts of this case that the verdict was an appropriate verdict based upon the evidence presented, at least. And when I say appropriate, what I mean is legal. Because I believe there's been some discussion about some differences between Mr. Bryan and the McMichaels. There may be some differences, but it does not change the fact that was it not for the fact that Mr. Bryan used his vehicle in a way to impede Mr. Arbery's course of travel, this may not have ever occurred, and that is sufficient for felony murder. He did cooperate with law enforcement. I will point out Mr. Goff 1710-1B. There's actually a case out of Chatham County that says it would not apply under the circumstances of this case. So the court recognizing that Mr. Bryan's position is different. Again, Mr. Bryan was found not guilty on count 1 and count 2. The court sentences Mr. Bryan to life with the possibility of parole on count 3. Count 4 is vacated. Count 5 is vacated. Count 6, the defendant was found not guilty. Count 7 merges into count 3. The defendant is sentenced to 10 years consecutive to count 3 on count 8 and 5 years concurrent with count 8. Both of those counts, though, will be suspended sentences, which gives Mr. Bryan a life with the possibility of parole sentence. Those are the sentences. The court having pronounced sentence, first with regard to Travis McMichael. Mr. McMichael, you are hereby notified that under the law of Georgia, you are entitled to appeal the guilty verdict of the jury, and if you decide to do so, you must file your appeal within 30 days of this date. You are also informed that you have the right to retain a lawyer of your own choice to represent you on your post-trial motions and appeals to the appropriate appellate court of Georgia. If you cannot afford a lawyer, the court will appoint one for you. You are entitled to and will be given a transcript of all pretrial, trial, and post-trial matters without cost to you if you cannot afford a transcript. You may file a motion for a new trial, or you may appeal your case directly to the appropriate appellate court of Georgia for review. You are also advised that the statute of limitations for habeas corpus in this state is 4 years in the case of felonies and 1 year in the case of misdemeanors. The statute begins to run from the date the conviction becomes final. And just to be clear on the record, I'm going to go through the statement with regard to each defendant. So as to Gregory McMichael, you are hereby notified that under the law of Georgia, you are entitled to appeal the guilty verdict of the jury. And if you decide to do so, you must file your appeal within 30 days of this date. You are also informed that you have the right to retain a lawyer of your own choice to represent you on your post-trial motions and appeals to the...
So, YouTubers, that was the handed down sentence by the judge. The McMichaels got life without parole, and Brody got life with parole, with the possibility of parole. The judge also wanted a moment of silence to send a message that the 5 minutes that Arbery took running, he wanted people to understand how long 5 minutes can be when you're fighting for your life. Take a listen or a watch.
Tragedy on many, many levels. On February 23rd of 2020, almost 2 years ago, a resident of Glynn County, a graduate of Brunswick High, a son, a brother, a young man with dreams, was gunned down in this community. As we understand it, he left his home apparently to go for a run, and he ended up running for his life. He entered the English home at approximately 1:04 p.m. and left that home at about 1:08 on that day. At 1:14, Greg McMichael calls 911 to let them know that there's a black male running down the street. And within moments, Ahmaud Arbery is shot and killed. The three men that are now before this court chased him in a residential neighborhood for at least 5 minutes in pickup trucks, armed with a shotgun and a .357 revolver. The state mentioned this today about the time period, but I do want to put that time period in context. And the only way I could think to do so may be a little theatrical, but I think it's appropriate. I want us all to get a concept of time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit silently for 1 minute. And that 1 minute represents a fraction of the time that Ahmaud Arbery was running in Satilla Shores. That's approximately a minute. Again, the chase that occurred in Satilla Shores occurred over about a 5-minute period. And when I thought about this, I thought from a lot of different angles, and I kept coming back to the terror that must have been in the mind of the young man running through Satilla Shores. The jury heard the evidence and returned a verdict. And what a difficult job they had under the circumstances. Without any comment on the verdict itself, I think all counsel will agree and accept that this was a very difficult case to even get a jury impaneled on. And there are issues out there with regard to the jury that were brought up in the press and elsewhere. But I want to give credit to those members of the panel, not because of their verdict, just because of the fact that they were willing to go through the process that they went through with the state, with the defense, and with this court.
So YouTubers, that was the verdict. This was a very, very emotional case. The father and son receiving life sentences without the possibility of parole, and Brody, the neighbor, receiving life sentence with the possibility of parole by Judge Timothy Wamsley. YouTubers, like, share, and subscribe to my channel and to this video by hitting that red subscribe button on the YouTube page before you leave. Thank you.